And
Just a mailing.
oh, well, we get certificates for our training.
Would be from MMA. This is GP cop.
I'm not reading them.
Right. You are.
Very over to you're right. Go ahead and open up the meeting now. And as usual, we will start with public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. Are there any such comments from the public? Going once, going twice? You have a comment, Suhail? Yes, I do. Please. I don't know. Right there.
Right by the, for anybody that would like to speak, if you make your way towards
So
the chair.
I paid our taxes and I found that they were higher than last year. That's all. There was any reasons for the increase?
We can't answer questions, but if you want to learn more about that, you could work with our town administrator to talk to the tax assessor and learn about your particular property.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions from the public, comments? Jackie?
This is just a comment about the tax assessor. I mentioned this to Christine at the office the other day, that I emailed him twice asking to be able to sit down with him and got no response yet. And it's been 2 weeks or so. And today I left a phone message with him. I don't think I've had a reply, but I haven't had a chance to check that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? All right, moving on. Town reports. Anika?
So we'll start out with the town administrator's report. The first thing on the list is the same thing that's been on repeatedly is we are in need of volunteers on committees. There are committees such as Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, and Finance Committee that volunteers are needed for. Finance Committee was recently created committee, and in order for them to be able to start any work and assist the select board in the budget process, we need 3 people. So we still need at least 1 member on that committee for them to be able to begin work. Until there is a quorum, they cannot start, and at that point are unable to work with the board and myself to be able to make any suggestions or recommendations. So if anybody has any suggestions or anybody that's interested to be on it, Mark, it would be very helpful, and just let us know at the office. The next thing is about the brush dump. So affordable well drilling has been here, and they have been shipping at the transfer station. The brush dump was closed last week. It is not being used very much this week. I have not sent out any notices about closure for this week. It's kind of been quiet, and so I've just kept it at that. And if any questions come up, I'll answer them individually. It was mentioned to me on Friday by the company that is hired to do that, that they have had to stop and go into town and purchase replacement parts for some of their equipment, because what they're finding is there are things in the brush dump that they are grinding up that doesn't belong there. And so I went up there on Friday and walked around, and I was able to very visibly see anything from rope to trash bags to beer cans to coffee cups that were mixed in within the shrub and the brush area with the logs and the brush dump that people were dumping. And so that, I believe, is what has slowed them down, and they have not returned so far this week. I will follow up to see if they're planning to start. But for those that have been up there, it's a really large pile. We have started to deliver, and there's been almost 30 trips made to deliver mulch to people around the island. It hasn't made a significant difference at the brush dump, but it's something. We are getting positive feedback from customers that they're happy that that service was provided. At this point, I would like the board's support to close the brush dump and only have it be accessible during transfer station hours. In the transfer station, in the policies and procedures, it does say that it will operate around the business hours, and that individual contractors can work independently with the town for special circumstances or special exceptions, or being able to get in there at other times. In addition to finding trash in there, I also measured some of the logs. The restriction for size is in diameter is up to 28 inches. I measured logs that were up to 41 inches in diameter, and they are supposed to be at a width no greater than 3 feet. And there were essentially full-size trees that were being dumped. So that was put in a couple of years ago specifically to accommodate the equipment that the company brings out there to be able to process this material. When there is material in there that is significantly larger, it slows them down, and they're having to cut that up. We're lucky that this company has agreed to do it this year for the same price, but I fully expect that this price is going to be the last time we pay for something like this, and I think it's going to increase. I think there is also going to be probably a lot heavier demands and expectations if this company wants to do it again. We did look earlier at other options, so either way, I think the cost is going to increase. It is a cost that we are not collecting any money for, so there is no revenue coming in for this cost, and that's another option that should be discussed, is making those changes in the future. For now, with the baby step, I would like your support in closing those gates and have them be open only during transfer station hours, so the attendant can at least have a better idea to visually see if a log is coming through and it's approximately 6 feet. They could be sent away and make sure that it's cut in the appropriate length. And the, I guess, last thing worth mentioning, which was discussed a little bit at the last meeting, is at some point this month, the barge company and Affordable Well Drilling will work with the town, and 3 tractor trailers will be brought out to the island in one day to remove some of the brush dump and get it off the island. Based on what that does in terms of volume, if it's somewhat of a noticeable impact, then I will come to the board and ask the board for possible money out of the reserve, out of the select board contingency, to see if maybe it could be efficient for us to try to do that a couple more times. The volume there is at a very unmanageable, dangerous level. There's concerns for fire and safety. And we have recently learned that not only is trash being dumped, but there are motorcyclists and bikers are using that area as a nice little pit to make wheelies, and it's providing a dangerous situation, so.
David?
Is there any signage there that indicates what can and cannot be dumped, and what's the other thing? Second, is there any signage there that indicates what the rules?
Not at the brush dump, no. I believe there is signage. Is there signage on the fees that was recently updated? Which would be in the
It just
transfer
doesn't,
station.
so fees.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about size or. There's a lot of details within the policies and procedures and transfer station fees that aren't out there unless you go and look at it. You have to make a sign super huge to put all of them.
I'm not suggesting that we post everything that goes there, but just a couple of the items that you mentioned. Nothing larger than 24 inches.
3 feet long,
What was the other one?
3 feet long,
Length
Yeah,
and diameter.
length, yeah. It was- Oh, trash.
no trash.
Only trash, only lumber.
Well, and I think that's why if the doors are closed and it's accessible when the transfer station is open, it would be easier to regulate that and explain to people when they come through.
I think people should know this now.
Beans does one by some.
Thank you, Vika. Is the wood chip delivery going to continue, or is that a?
We are keeping a list. We're experiencing some challenges as of today with that particular vehicle. While also being mindful that there is other work that needs to be done. Effective next week, we're down to 1 employee. So I think at this point, we did a lot of that last week, and that was kind of the week we advertised that it would do. We are keeping an ongoing list, and we'll accommodate people as best as we can.
Okay. I heard it was well received, and I myself got 3 loads. Will closing the gates prevent access by 2-wheeled vehicles?
Closing the gates will allow it so that people have to drive through the transfer station entrance.
But people on motorcycles and bicycles that are in there, will closing the gates prevent access of?
I believe, so I think what's happening now is because it's accessible through the Public Works Department, they can come and go there at day and night. I can't imagine that those people that are going there and misusing that, like they have areas like the golf course, they will do when the building is open for business during the day.
Yeah, good. And I have a third question, the people who are taking down the large trees, they're well aware of the size restrictions? Maybe this is a question for you, Jeff.
It'll be an education, communication process.
Okay,
As we say, transfer station now only the access for brush dumps. Here are the parameters to use the brush dump.
okay,
So it's part of that education process.
thank you.
So even when the transfer station is open, the gate from Public Works to the brush dump would remain closed, so that if you want to get into the brush dump, you have to go through the transfer station. Okay. Yes, Richard.
That answers one of my questions. I wasn't aware of the gate from the other side of the entrance. Good. The other question is, you did mention revenue, and it seems to be a big drain on the town's finances. And it seems to me, since probably, I will guess, a lot of this is from commercial usage. that we should
Majority of
definitely
it,
be
yes.
setting up a charging system for this. Sounds like a good idea.
It was discussed a couple of years ago, and there was a big pushback from some of the contractors. The town did sit down with the majority of the users, and there was feedback, and there was a lot of opposition to closing the gates. And the town heard that and didn't close the gates, but I think at the level that's being dumped, but more so what is being dumped and the difficulty of controlling it at this point, it's become a necessity less than the generous accommodation that's been continuing for many years.
I would add that in that last discussion, one of the proposals was to provide 7 day a week access by way of a passcode system with electronic gates. And that proposal didn't go anywhere, and then the conversation kind of fizzled out. This is a different approach. This approach says, let's only let access happen to that mostly contractor-oriented brush dump during the hours of the transfer station. And while I think it's understandable that some contractors in particular might want access, 7 days a week, it's somewhat analogous to construction waste, which only has access. Contractors who have construction waste can only haul that in when the transfer station is open. Not a one-to-one comparison, but I would suggest that if we're going to discuss long-term policy changes like this, that we might want to do it once it's been on the agenda so that people have time to read it, think about it, and come to the meeting. I would suggest that we put it on an agenda for a subsequent meeting, but I would support the administration's direction to keep it closed until we can get past the current situation with the equipment that's working in there. I suspect there have been instances of contractors talking either to you or Jeff or Jamie and finding exceptions if they had an emergency or had something they had to get rid of, but.
On advertising the closure, I personally did not receive a single communication from anybody about it.
All right, Jeff, anybody?
They just asked me, is it open yet or not? Nobody's been negative. It's strictly a safety issue.
May I ask one other question? When we're looking for members on the transfer
Station.
station committee, that addresses the wood dump, as the brush dump as well,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm beating the bushes on them.
Yes, yeah.
Working on. I think I need to carry around the papers to give to people when I chat with.
So is it the sense of the board that town administrator should move forward with keeping it closed until things get cleaned up, and then let's see how it looks after 3 trailer loads leave?
Because
David.
thank you.
And have an agenda item to discuss.
Yeah, go on future agendas, and then, signage. I think some basic signage about length and girth would be appropriate. Even though you're gonna be talking to people when they come through, maybe a sign right at the gate where the refrigerators used to be, that says something like that. Thanks, Vika. You have more, I'm sure.
You have questions.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Suhail and then Mark, please.
I'm just, going to clarification from the administrator. Is the other gate is always open 24/7. And I see a lot of people going in because I live on Little Field. But if, I suggest that you should close it and have it, a policy where everybody should, dump their wood when it's open and pay their dues.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Marshall.
I agree with what Suhail said. I think currently there's not a gate there physically. Is that accurate?
No, it's not put up. There is a gate laying down in the ground, and I just recently learned that it is, it needs some TLC before it can go up.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we put that up regardless of how you pursue this policy. I have a suggestion for you to think about when you start talking about, or if you start talking about charging fees at the brush dump, and you're already charging fees at the transfer station. Maybe it's time to consider some sort of ticket situation for at least commercial users to consider being able to purchase at the town office for a fee of, say, $100 to $500, and then they could go up there and see Jeff and use it up and make the system be a little bit smoother instead of forgetting their checkbook and owing money and put the suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Other comments from the public? Jackie?
I was thinking as during the discussion that it makes sense for some kind of fee schedule for the, perhaps what Mark is suggesting. We're charging fees for the, at the transfer station, and we have to pay to transport these 3 trailer loads of stuff.
Thanks, Jack.
And I would be interested to know how much the one trailer load costs approximately.
It's gonna cost about $6,000 to get 3 tractor trailers off.
Thank you.
You got more?
Yeah, a couple more things. So the next thing is leading right into the transfer station compactors. So a couple of weeks ago, it was brought to your attention that I would be coming to the board for authorization to appropriate some money to service the compactors. I was ideally thinking it was going to be an agenda item, but there's really not a lot of discussion that's needed in this sense, other than the compactors have not been maintenance regularly. And we invested in a new one a couple of years ago. Jeff did a lot of work in figuring out what the cost is to get all of the maintenance at the same time. So we would like to proceed with appropriating the funds so that could be scheduled and done, and then come up with a plan whether a couple of them are, scheduled every other year. So it's not just a heavy unexpected blow when a compactor breaks and it's $15,000 to $20,000 expense. So.
There's a suggested motion in notes. David,
I'd like
yes?
to take that suggested motion and authorize the town administrator to spend up to $4,700 from reserve account
recycling compactor, 20 packs, 2,000. So what cost of compactor maintenance?
9,057, but yes. Was that a second, Liza?
Second.
Second by Eliza. Motion by David. Discussion from the board. Any discussion from the public? Jeff?
So just one fine print I saw in there. I think it said, taxes weren't added as part of that quote figure, which was like 4,681. So if something is thrown on there for taxes, it may push it over that.
There
40
will be no taxes. We're tax exempt. So
Okay, I just didn't know what,
Yeah.
didn't want to go over that, but 4,700 with $18 to spare.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, motion on the floor has been seconded. All in favor? Unanimous with Carol absent. Vika, you have more on there?
One more topic on this one, and that's relative to FEMA update. So at the last meeting, I told you that we were going to be getting a new FEMA representative, and I told the board that I would let you know when they were coming out. I met with the new FEMA representative in a very short amount of time. We were able to, through Zoom, go over a lot of information. A lot of information was processed. What she did is she pushed our projects through CRC, so they're bringing it to the next step where their engineers and their staff are going to come up with cost estimates. So then the town has a general idea of what cost of these replacements and upgrades would be. So then the town can make a better decision in terms of which direction and how to move forward, especially with some of these places like South Shore and East Shore, where it's just difficult to know where to even start. And so I did get a final confirmation from her today. 3 representatives will be coming out on Thursday. And the purpose of this is to discuss, so with all the projects, the way that it fit is it ended up being 6 different projects. A lot of the right away to shore areas were blended into one project. So Willow Street going to Hamilton, a little bit down on Jenks Road, Waldo Point Road. So areas where it was right away to shore access that received some damage, but not at the magnitude that East Shore Drive, South Shore Drive, and Stone Pier. And so there are 6 projects. And so 3 of them are going to come out here on Thursday. In detail, we're going to discuss all of the projects, what was submitted, and start brainstorming about what the next steps could look like and what they would look like. Mitigation is gonna be as one of those 3 people. They've been out here before. There really hasn't been a whole lot of motion. A different person is coming out this time. And so in these discussions, we're also going to seek some assistance in terms of how mitigation can play a role in some of these projects.
Mitigation meaning build back better relative to sea level rise?
Correct. There are grant opportunities and things like that around FEMA that will assist the town in building back to the pre-storm that FEMA could reimburse, but then separately looking at what can you do to improve it to be better. And that's where mitigation steps in and assists you in grant opportunities in other areas that could be helpful. So I know in the past, David and Bob were the 2 people that had come to those. So if you're interested, by all means.
Thursday, I think tomorrow.
Yes, they're coming on the 8th.
When, how long do you think?
So I believe they're going to be here until at least the noon. I'm hoping no later than the noon.
Yeah, I think I can do that. Next Thursday.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, if you want to come to the town office for 9 o'clock, we'll get them picked up and then bring them right to the town office where we're going to go over all the details. And then if they want to see some of the locations at the town office, yeah.
Excuse me, will they be helping with the grants that are available?
Um,
Or is it?
that, they provide assistance in terms of how we proceed. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're gonna walk us through grant process.
One note to consider though, we do, I think, have hopes that this, person from GP Cog, a fellow, I think it's called, that starts in January. We're hoping that person will help with grant applications and such. Yeah. Great.
And I guess the only other thing worth mentioning to that, now that I've been able to get to this process with FEMA, I did finally have a good conversation with MEMA. South Shore Drive residents are very eager to discuss things with the town. And so I did respond to an email today saying that after tomorrow's meeting, then I would like to follow up and coordinate a meeting between the town and those residents, help them understand what took place from Thursday's meeting and see how we can move forward. The biggest thing with that particular is, you know, the issue of who owns the land, and them needed to really look into the survey. So I will follow up with South Shore Drive probably on Friday and try to schedule something for the following week.
I think that's Carol and David working on that with you, is that correct?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
You and Carol were the two board members who were working with South Shore.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I'll keep in touch with you about when it comes time to scheduling something.
All right.
So that's everything for the town administrator report.
Yep.
If you don't have any other questions, I'll move on to the treasurers. So the treasurer's report as of September 27, the reconciliation was done through July. Our new bookkeeper and Andrew was able to successfully learn and complete 1 month of reconciliation within his first week on the job, which is very exciting. He is working on August. August has created a little bit of a challenge for him. And so we're hoping that by the next meeting, you will have August and maybe September. But all in all, the Machias Savings Bank account is in good standing. The reserve account balance is a little over 1.7 million. There were transfers that were done from the school's votes from their undesignated funds into the school reserve accounts. The town reserve accounts, there was a little over $500,000 that was voted at town meeting to appropriate into reserve accounts. Because of a lot of expenses revolved around many different things. This is usually when we make our debt payments and a lot of other payments. I like to wait a little bit until we get a large influx of tax payments. So then when we pull over $500,000 out of the checking account of, you know, of an average 1.5 million, it doesn't feel like such a punch. So that you'll see in the October reconciliation, the transfers from checking will go into those reserve accounts.
So none of the reserve accounts have been updated from this past budget process.
The town ones have not, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And as far as revenue, the month of August, the town took in $15,000 in solid waste fees. So it's a busy month for solid waste fees. So the excise tax was the next highest one, $8,000. So that's people registering their cars and collecting excise. And the newer those cars get, the more we're getting excise tax at the town revenue. And so other than that, there aren't really any concerns with the budget. There were some over expenditures in the fire department budget. When I noticed that, I sat down with the fire chief and their administrative secretary, and we talked about there was an unexpected expense for radio upgrades that had to happen. So at the next meeting, I'll be coming to you with some appropriations for that. But there's a couple little corrections that need to be made in the fire department budget to offset the 1 or 2 areas where you see overage. But that's not anything to be concerned going into the rest of this season.
Will that be an agenda item? Will that be part of the year?
I will probably put it as an agenda item. It will be, it's an unexpected upgrade that they had to do in addition to all the other upgrades that were happening. And so there is a reserve account for things like that. And so we'll be asking for appropriation to cover that bill from that account. So that will be on the next agenda item.
Yep.
Next meeting, sorry.
Yep.
And that's all I have for the reports.
No committee updates.
Nope.
All right, moving along. Item 24-09, any questions from the board relative to the treasury report? Any public? All right, thank you. Item 24-090, to discuss and review the suggested Coastal Waters Committee Management Plan for Marine Infrastructure and take any necessary action. So it was included in the packet. I believe this is a holdover from our last meeting, and basically we're just voting to approve this.
Yes.
Do we have a suggested motion in here or no?
No,
Okay.
it would just be to approve the 2024 Marine Infrastructure Maintenance Plan
Yep.
as written.
So any discussion from the board?
It was an impressive report. Like when I read it after this last meeting, this is really critical. Well done.
Coastal Waters gets all the credit for that.
So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the 2024 Marine Infrastructure Maintenance Plan as written.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Richard. Discussion? Any discussion from the public? Mark?
Very quickly, if I may, I assume that accepting this includes the recommendation to consider budgeting up to $15,000 into the float and ramp replacement. Secondly, will there be discussions separately at some point for any interest in maintaining the town marine infrastructure?
We've had that discussion and we're actually in the process of getting bids.
Thank you.
Other comments from the public, questions?
I just, so a couple comments relative to the bids. We did have a couple come in. There were a couple that kind of came in a little bit later. The deadline that was there, we had received one, so I waited a couple extra days. I passed those on to Coastal Waters, so Coastal Waters will have a discussion, then we'll bring a recommendation that I will bring to the board. So that's one part of it. The other part, the town did receive a grant last year and this year for the making of 2 different floats. And Justin did get a notice from the company saying that they're pretty much both complete. And so there will be plans to have 2 floats, which majority was covered by grants, not the $15,000 of tax money. So those will be making their way to the island. And so next spring, those will be making their way into the water.
The motion on the floor, it's been seconded, discussed. All in favor? Unanimous with Carol absent. All right, thank you. 24-091, to hear an update of the survey that went out about priorities and taking the necessary action. Eliza and Vika, would one of you take the lead on that conversation?
Eliza, all you?
I'd love to. So when I became a new member and I met with you, Bob, and I said, so what are the priorities of the board? I think there's a lot of consensus among the board, but also looks like some among our community as well. But having an accurate assessment of that, I think is important. So this survey is intentionally very open-ended as a way to gather as much information as possible. I don't want to be specific about results in part because the survey is still open, but we have a workshop day where we'll have the final analysis. but I'm going to give you some general things. First off, we have a high rate of summer visitors filling out this form of summer. So I think that that's important, and I'm curious about that. But what I like is the amount of participation. So actually, we've had 104 respondents so far, which I think is quite good, especially for a lengthy survey. Most of the people are property, own property, so it's actually a very high percentage. And most of the people are age 55 and up, and that's not a surprise either. When we have those 5 categories, and it's always difficult for people when you say, please rank them. What is your number 1? What is your number 2? That is a challenge to do, but it is better it gives us better data. What I'll say is that it gives us no surprises at this time that looking at the Stone Wharf and parking are number 1 and number 2. And I'm really pleased with the work that's been done by the select board, really in many ways before my arrival, to prepare for the meeting tomorrow and address some of that. When it comes to the comments, many of the comments are things that as islanders we understand. A couple things that stand out is the need for more information to the public, and I see 2 great examples here in this meeting so far today when we talk about trash that's found in the brush dump. I think when people understand the ramifications of having that trash in their brush and how that causes an additional expense, I think people are going to be much more compliant about being careful. But that's a matter of having PSAs, a public service announcement that explains that. And I also look at good news that we have about the wharves, the docks that are being replaced. So I think these, again, are opportunities for addressing the fact that the survey shows that we need some more communication about that. Hey, listen, I think we have a pretty reasoned community based on the responses. People gave very careful and creative responses to what is working well and what needs to be improved in our community, which really just shows such a high level of involvement. I'm not going to go beyond that with the report, but I think that's good. I'm going to just say, when it comes to the question that says, so if these are things you want, how would you rate having it impact your taxes? I think that when people have a better understanding of how much things cost and what are the benefits of some of these investments, I think that we would see better, higher response of agreeing to have their taxes raised to pay for specific things. And I think that there are really some good ways to engage the community about that. But in general, I would say people think that that's important. That's all I want to give for now, because I don't want to give it away.
Well, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? From the public? Suhail?
I think what Eliza Jane has done is excellent. A survey like this is so important because I believe that the participation and the numbers she got from summer people, they are expressing their views and participating in the community. What I'd like to ask you is, how many did you get out? What are you expecting? What is the total number you have sent to the community? Is it 500? So we can have a better understanding of the responses and how we will move forward. I think the questions were excellent. I'm still haven't submitted my final survey report, but I think it's an important piece of information that will help the board and the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you want to answer that?
Yes, Suhail, the survey is online and it's been advertised on the town website through the text alerts from the town. It's on Shabik.org as well, and on the Town of Shabik Facebook page. In addition, there are paper copies that have been made available in the office. And honestly, I know that there are a few there that I still need to input. So paper copies are available as well.
But it's open-ended, there is no limit number. I mean, we're not sending it to the, just limited to the summer and rather, it's an
No,
open-ended.
It's open to anyone connected to Shabig Island, whether they are a year-round resident, summer resident, visitor. It's open to all of those. Yeah. And it will be until next Wednesday. So I'm hoping to see another 100 in the next week. And I think that would give us a really good, deep appreciation for feedback from the community.
Early on, one of the summaries that came through was about half year-round residents and half not year-round residents. Is that ratio still falling
Pretty
close?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vic?
One thing to add is, so next week, the select board is doing an off-island retreat where the focus is specifically on priorities. And the executive director of JPCOG, which is the Greater Portland Government of Commerce, is going to be the moderator for that. That is going to be helping the board walk through the results of what the residents have said and what the board's priorities are, figure it out, how those get combined together, and making essentially steps into how to move forward and how to take all of that feedback and put it into a constructive process of knowing what time frame is looking like for some of these projects, what needs to be handled in line with the day-to-day tasks of just operating as a town. And so after that workshop, the board probably on the next agenda item will have an agenda item to kind of recap how that went and what will take place in terms of the future steps as a board.
Is the retreat open to the public?
What's that?
The retreat, is it open to the public?
So any board meeting of 3 or more is open to the public. This particular retreat, people are welcome to come, but there will be no public participation. So it will be a workshop where there will be no feedback from the public. And it's in town, yes. It's not on Shabig, it's off island.
Jackie?
I'd like to suggest, that, you put a blurb, an additional blurb on Bev's website, detailing that anyone who's connected to Shabig is welcome to complete the survey. I'm talking about the younger,
Well, Jackie, there's a question that asks, are you 25 and under,
okay,
55 and under, or over? And we haven't had anyone 25 and under fill it out yet.
okay, I'll
Which I
take
think would be
steps.
lovely.
I shall take steps, to, talk with my 25 and unders.
Because it's possible to separate out some of that information, which I think can be helpful. And a final report will be available to the community once the results of the survey have closed.
And in, my suggested additional blurb on Bev's website, I think it would be advantageous to include the fact that the selectmen will be addressing the results at the retreat, just public.
I think it says that in the introduction, but that's so easy to pass over. But I think the right time to have a second round of announcements about the survey is after tomorrow night.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on, item number 24-092, to discuss the updated Yarmouth Wharf Pier inspection report and take any necessary action. Any opening comments from the board? I have one I would like to offer. I think after our last discussion, and I think in light of some of the early results from this priorities survey, and I think just in conjunction with tomorrow night's meeting, it might be time to have the joint standing committee address this topic in a slightly more holistic fashion. And as opposed to looking at the state of the current pier and the repair of the current pier, to back up and to maybe have Shabig take the lead on a broader discussion of that pier in light of sea level rise, design flood elevations, wave runoff. It's almost occurring to me that we should be looking at both of those piers simultaneously in terms of the challenges they face. We can do a lot to improve the Stone Pier, and if we lose the Cousins Pier, Stone Pier doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So my suggestion would be that the board charter the members of the board who go to the JSC to talk to the JSC about should be getting more involved in that design process, and that incorporating the engineering review of the current state of the pier over there with a look ahead and what could be done in a reasonable time frame with the kind of cost restrictions and grant opportunities that we're looking at for the Stone Pier. Because if you recall, Shabig's responsible for 80% of the cost of the capital improvements to that pier. And so it might make sense for us to be more involved in not just a review of the current state, but also in looking at other things that could be changed over there relative to sea level rise, but also relative to the ADA 80-foot ramp concept, the expansion of the float to include the ability to accept that 80-foot ramp, but also to include more tie-up space for the people who are commuting in seasonally in small boats. So is a sense of the board that that be a decent direction to follow at this point, as opposed to just blessing what we've received to try to open the conversation up a bit and then bring any thoughts back to this board?
Yeah, I thought it was to be considering the two different things separate. It is a more.
Yeah, they're related. That work for you, David? No. Okay. Comments, Vika, on that concept?
The only thing is that there was concern from CTC about making sure that the pier is stable enough for this winter and whatever this might bring, and this is separate from that. Their Public Works Department has gone and spoken to somebody, and they are going to do some minor repairs and kind of fasten things and bolt things down, that it's not a large project, just to make sure that the pier is solid for the upcoming winter and any storms that it might experience.
Good point.
So does that include strapping down the planks
Yes.
and the issue of where there's foam that would spray foam that was going to cause the rot to happen more quickly?
It has caused the rock to happen more quickly. That's a longer term issue.
That's a longer term. Okay. No,
That's
I think while this report is really helpful, there are some flaws in the appreciation for how we need to look at this holistically with a lot of thought. I'm glad that you have that recommendation, Bob.
David?
It's been a long time since I've read that agreement. If there are improvements and or repairs in the works, do we have, does the town have any say about this? That seems like a good idea.
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Yes,
we
that's
approved-
why this is in front of
I think we approved the short-term repairs that Vic is talking about
Yes.
already. We've already approved that. The other point that I think we should pay attention to is it's pretty easy to look at the amount of money that we've set aside for the long-term capital improvements and repairs to that pier. And say that's what that money's there for. But at this stage of the fiscal state of our country, there might also be grant opportunities out there for possibly repair of that pier, but certainly for resiliency improvements to that pier. So we should talk to the JSC and then come back to this board and consider grant opportunities for that as well.
One other thing worth mentioning is there has been the start of the interest of can where CTC lands be relocated in the future? If that ends up going anywhere, does the town want to invest a large sum of money into a location that potentially might not be the primary in the future? So I think exploring that conversation a little bit before investing significant chunk of the cash that's in that reserve account would be a beneficial thing.
Comments from the public? Mark? You can speak up.
So, for clarification purposes, did I hear that you're prepared to allow some money to go into the current structure that President Donald Morris is prepared?
We've already approved that, yes.
Because at the last big set of storms in December, I received a video from Stu Brown of the water coming right up off of that bridge. So it has to be refastened.
That video was sent to the engineer and to the Yarmouth Public Works, because that's what brought this discussion for doing some temporary repair that are completely separate from these long-term repairs.
I agree with the comments that you just made. I would not consider a big investment until a longer term conversation is had. So, has the meeting taken place over there on the wharf with a marine contractor present that you're aware of?
Yes.
Okay,
We were over there with their public works chief and their engineers and their town manager. We being Vika and me, I believe.
And, yeah,
And-
Matt Ridgway
and
came
Ridgway.
as well.
And then in that conversation, we brought up, they were already aware of some of the board lifting. They were not at that time aware of the beam lifting. Since that conversation, they've gone down there with a couple of contractors and they've now made arrangements with contractors to refasten the beams to the appropriate crib or bent that they sit on, and also refasten the boards to the beams using what I would call, in the first case, major L Simpson bracketry, and then something better than hurricane clips for the boards to the bends, or the boards to the beams.
good, thank you. And just one thing that I will say, I would be prepared, if asked, to serve on a small group, possibly with the joint planning committee with discussion with the Yarmouth and the DOT, that we're looking for someone from the community.
Thanks, Mark. Other comments from, Sue Hill, you had a comment?
I just wanted to educate me a bit. If, how much is the town of Yarmouth involved in this?
Well, they own the land. They're part of the long-term agreement that we have relative to the Blanchard lot and the pier.
Yeah.
And they contribute 20% of the annual contribution into a fund that's aimed at long-term maintenance and improvements to that pier. We contribute 80% to that. And we talk about what to do collaboratively with the recognition of the funding differences. They use the pier as we do, but percentage-wise, we use that pier to get to our float with far more frequency than they use that pier to get to their float, which is sort of the reason behind the 80-20.
The state of Maine has dominance over the pier. I mean, what I want to be assured from the board tonight is that.
Could you step up, please, so people can hear you?
I want to educate me again, because I want to be assured that the Yarmouth pier is a lifeline for the Cheviot Island.
Yes.
The town of Yarmouth cannot contest the transportation line.
That fact is contained in that consent decree, which I believe is a 99-year lease.
Yeah, I think you need to emphasize that for the community, because they're not very clear about that.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, moving on. Item 24-093, to discuss the outcome of the recent changes to the traffic and parking ordinance and take any necessary action. Vika, you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, very briefly. So this ordinance was changed in August, right before, Labor Day, in time for the sheriff to be able to assist in some of the changes of the Stone Pier. And it was very clearly stated that upon that change and that quote unquote this experiment, that it would come back to the town for a discussion about any positive or negative feedbacks of what was witnessed, what they thought was helpful, what wasn't, and then taking that information and ultimately adjusting any necessary changes in a future meeting relative to the ordinance, and then using that information in the bigger picture of what will be done long-term at the Stone Pier.
Are you recommending that we review those ordinance changes and either leave them in or rescind a few of them? Do you have any recommendations on that front?
So at this point, I believe that it would be nice to just seek feedback from the board and from the public about anything that they feel is or isn't appropriate as it sits in the ordinance. And then at that point, I would make the necessary adjustments and bring it to the board for future vote if they wanted to approve any of the changes. I don't think going over it line by line at this point is going to be efficient. And I think it would be better if you had something a little bit more finalized that had been discussed. I think that would be the most transparent and fair thing for the public to take that route.
Any comments from the board?
I do. I've heard the need again, several more times from people in the community for more handicap spots seasonal. That during the summer season, when there's more people parking, those handicap spots are filling up too fast. So maybe we could look at some way to incorporate some seasonal handicap only parking spots that are, but by Labor Day, we could change that. But I think that that's an important. The other thing that I've heard is concern about how to enforce the commuter spots. And I see that as some of a PR issue with people on two sides of the fence. One is it's so challenging for residents to be parking there when it's used so much by non-residents, but I see some issues with trying to find a fair way to enforce that. So I am concerned about that. The third thing is, I love the idea that these large trucks and commercial vehicles are only parking on Wharf Road. And because we have a challenge right now with the person who's enforcing the parking, but just finding a way to communicate that perhaps in a printed ticket that goes on as a way to get those vehicles off the wharf or out of the parking that's lower down for vehicles. I think that's a really good move, and like to see that happen.
We've started working on a one-page flyer with a QR code to post at the Stone Pier, because the current parking attendant suggested that more education is needed about what the rules are.
I think people are happy to go by the rules when they know. Thank you.
Having said that, I have noticed a few contractors have started parking down on the wharf again. I assume they'll get ticketed as appropriate.
The challenge is the education, no matter where you put it, what social media page, what website page, not everyone is going to hear it or listen to it.
Yep.
And the reason that the commuter section was ultimately added in the area was because there was just like need for the handicap, there was heavy feedback from people who are commuting every single day, people that are making a choice to live on this island, to raise their families and leave it every single day for work, because there isn't every job opportunity on this island. And with that, what those residents were finding is on the 345 and the 445, when the contractors are leaving the island, they're taking up a lot of the prime spots up close. And so the next morning, they're coming off on the same boats that these commuters are trying to run for, and the commuters are having to park up far and contractors are getting. And so the combination of removing contractors from the immediate Stone Wharf area to provide some of those open spaces, whether for commuter or for people that need more handicap accessibility, and providing the area for commuters, that was kind of the idea behind it. The commuter section, and that's something that was stated in the early discussion. That's something that was put in the ordinance. It has not been enforced. The primary focus really was that immediate, having that area of no parking and having the sheriff try to work that section. And so at this point, what is being enforced is to prevent from trailers being parked, to try to move contractors to parallel park, and try to see what other improvements could be made in short term to meet some of the immediate needs, while understanding that you can't expand the parking lot overnight.
Have you documented any feedback from the public for or against these changes?
So I have verbally had people come to me and tell me that they like being able to pull up. I had one email that was received from suggestions about some of the concerns. But I wouldn't say that I don't have emails or documented paperwork. There's been a lot of verbal feedback.
And how would you characterize the verbal feedback, positive, negative?
I've received a lot of positive feedback, primarily on the fact that efforts are being made to make a change. The negative feedback has been that you're eliminating the spots, which is causing people to park further up, which is causing people to park more on South Road. Maybe you need an offsite satellite parking lot, which those are all things that I think are important to consider, and things that we shouldn't pose. One of the biggest ideas that has come out of this, and I hope that in these discussions, the board maybe can contribute to a more serious thought process, is there was a suggestion from a resident about bringing a taxi service back to the island. I have heard from people that the cost of the insurance is what is the most discouraging part for people about having a taxi service. So it would be great if the board somehow, or if the town came up with an agreement or a contract with an individual who wanted to have a taxi business and not be involved in the running or the operating of it, but you provide the taxi service, and the town covers the cost of the insurance, but you need to have transportation for the kids upon availability, like certain little stipulations or something, so the town can benefit from it, but then also we can have somebody afford to provide the service for the community. So those are kind of all of the little things that have come out of these discussions that we're keeping in mind in terms of what could be suggested for a short term going into the next season, and what could be incorporated in a more long-term discussion.
One more related question, if I may. What is the status of talks with the golf club about the whole widening of the wharf road and so forth?
You can get a brief update on that in executive session relative to land acquisition and development tonight.
And there will be more discussed on that tomorrow.
There will be more mention to the public. There will be some mention of it tomorrow evening at the Stonework meeting.
I would like to encourage the youth. It would seem to me it would be good to have some big signs down there at the parking area that describe that contractors can't be parking there, that the trailers need to be elsewhere. Not only to make it clear to the contractors, maybe they don't know, but it'd also be good PR for the general public to know that, oh, they can't park there. And then it'll encourage more people to participate and encouraging them not.
We started working on a flyer and I have a QR code created.
That sign does not like a good sign. I'm off. In fact, I was just visiting a town in Canada this past weekend, and they had terrible signs. I parked on the wrong side of the street. I got a $30 ticket. And you look at the sign, and it was like, yeah, it was there, but I didn't see it. So I'm off the big sign.
I agree with Richard. I would suggest we might want to wait to buy signs until we finalize the parking ordinance. I've heard, for example, the suggestion that we change what we in the ordinance refer to as a commuter section to year-round section.
Yes.
And that might better be supported. A lot of this discussion might better be supported with some sort of parking sticker situation for island cars, similar to the way that we use parking stickers over there. So I'm going to put this on a future agenda item to come back to, and in that agenda item, we'll ask for the board members to come back with specific suggestions.
The signage that we're considering now is really just kind of 8.5 by 11 laminated and, you know, put them on telephone posts because signage is an investment. They cost money, they disappear easily. And until we have something a little bit more permanent, it's just not cost effective to spend a couple $100 on a sign.
If you know me, I love working on a good flyer. I'd be glad to help out.
Okay.
All right, comments from the public on that? Mark?
I thank you for thinking outside the box. I didn't agree with everything that you tried down there, but I tried to not be too negative about it. This is the one ordinance that the select board has the ability to change as long as you discuss it in public and advertise it adequately without a town meeting. And it's important to remember that. There's good and bad with that. You can change things and pile things up and make people very unhappy. One thing that I would suggest that you might want to think about even right away, I would consider having residents parking only on the actual footprint of the stone wall and not even allow off-island individuals to park down there. And try to consider that and make that an immediate policy of the select board and see how it works and see if it benefits the commuters and the people traveling back and forth.
Thanks, Mark.
It's a good suggestion.
All right.
Jackie.
Maggie.
Regarding handicap parking, I would request that you consider the seasonal increase in parking spots extend to Columbus Day.
Thank you, Jackie. Other comments from the public? Sue,
I think you described it very well. The 4 o'clock, they come and they park and they leave. So the people who are coming for residents come at the 4, they get pick their cars. They can't come in the morning to park because already the contractors are there. So it is a dilemma. And I think it should be open to everybody to park. But there has to be, if you want to take the initiative, you can put signs and educate the public where the priorities are for early commuters to find spaces, to get to their work efficiently and happily. So we can put signs, and with time, they might be removed, we'll put them back, they'll be educated, and everybody will know the future of this island.
Thank you, Suzanne. Others? All right.
So relative to what Mark said, that would be something that would be very easy to implement very quickly. If the board wanted to consider something like that, we could order a couple hundred stickers. You could advertise to the public that residents only. A resident could be somebody that has to be a registered voter. That's how residency is tracked in most places. You want to park there, you come to the town, show proof of residency, or we make sure you're registered, get a sticker, and then you have park, and then the parking attendant is able to recognize which vehicle belongs and which doesn't. And so that, I think those are kind of the small things that could be changed and implemented where there's less confusion, and that's actually a very good suggestion.
So we'll add that for future. All right, moving on. We need to elect a new select board member to the town CTC standing committee. Carol stepped down now that her husband Herb is on the CTC board. Anybody so interested? CTC.
Would you talk about what is responsible, give us the scoop.
Lisa, you would probably know better than
So this is more or less two select board members, and there are a couple of board members from the CTC committee and often Matt Ridgway. And if there are things that need to be discussed in terms of the mutual relationships, then that's what you discuss and then bring it back to the board. The few discussions that I've participated in that, it's been relative to what kind of a recommendation using CTC's input could come back to the joint standing committee with Shabig and Yarmouth to make sure that there is an understanding from the CTC perspective about what needs to be done.
Given that clear explanation, I having been formerly on the CTC and having some interest in that group, I volunteered.
Seeing nobody else?
Well,
You-
you want to.
I did it for 7 years, no thanks.
Dang
Dave,
Motion just to be official, so we have it for record.
So it's a one person.
No, it's, who's the other person? What's on it? Carol?
Who's the second person?
That's what we're asking.
Okay, so it was Carol and Mark. Mark, do you remember who was on the list?
I thought it was Bob.
I thought it was Bob too. I thought it was you that took over Jen's place.
Okay.
And when Mark left, Carol took over. No. Jen took over, yes, I think it's you. I'm almost certain.
Okay. So if you meet.
It was Bob.
Okay.
Carol and Bob. Yes. It's him.
Okay.
Making a spreadsheet of all those subcommittees, because it's getting impossible to keep track of.
I thought Carol had mentioned in her email where she said she wanted to step down, that it was somebody besides me, but I'll have to look back to that email. For now, we'll assume it's me. All right, thank you.
Make a motion.
Oh, yes. Is there a motion that Richard become the new person to replace Carol on the CTC Town Joint Standing Committee?
So,
Second?
Right there. Second.
Conversation? All in favor? All right. Unanimous with Carol absent. And moving on to 24095, sort of the same conversation relative to the JSC the Joint Standing Committee with Yarmouth, given that Mark is no longer part of the board. Carol did express in her email about stepping down from the CTC Standing Committee that she has a lot of interest in serving on the Joint Standing Committee. If anybody else does,
One vacancy.
one vacant seat on there, yeah.
In Carol's absence, I would move we appoint Carol to the joint standing.
Love it. Is there a second to that? Second by Eliza.
And are you the second
I
person?
am the second person on that, know that.
Liza, you seconded that?
I'd be interested in doing it, but I'm gonna defer to Carol because of her.
No, just second the motion.
Yes, yes.
All right, conversation,
Yeah, I would be interested, but I'm clearly going to defer to Carol because of her experience.
All right.
I'd like to be in the loop as much as possible.
all in favor? All right. All right, other business, any other business items, Vika?
Yes, well, one thing, that came up, today is, so I received a notification that, one of the town public works vehicles went out of commission. We're still working on resolve that problem, but then, even more so damaging than that, we have been given a very detailed explanation and a video footage explaining why the town forerunner is no longer safe and should be put out of commission effective immediately. We experienced some issues with it today. Ask somebody with mechanical experience, take a look at it. There is absolutely nothing that's holding it together. There is a large fuel leak that caused a lot of loud noises. And that is putting us into a position where effective tomorrow, we do not have a reliable vehicle to use to pick up the FEMA that's coming over. Or the Stone Wharf people that are coming over. And so, the town does have a reserve account. There's about $18,000 in that reserve account, specifically for these kind of things. I did start looking briefly to see what we can find for a used vehicle. We need something that is all-wheel drive. We need something that can fit a number of passengers. I looked at some rebates available through some places. As quickly as we really need a vehicle, we don't have the money to buy an electric vehicle or to utilize the $7,000 rebate that is available. We still wouldn't have the money for that. And so I'm hoping that the board can authorize a motion up to $15,000 so we could try to find a reasonable four-wheel drive vehicle that is inspection passable that we can hopefully have in the next couple of weeks to use, because it gets used every single day, but by different staff, whether it's from code enforcement officer, assessor, and so forth. And so it's kind of a very unexpected need that we experienced this afternoon.
Any thoughts?
If the board does support, I mean, I'm not gonna go out and buy whatever, obviously, there'll be a lot of research that goes into it. It needs to be inspectable. That's key. It needs to be something that can go. We were thinking a van, but vans are very low and they don't go very well in some of these town roads that the code enforcement officer and assessor need to be accessible to. And so if the board is comfortable in making a motion to authorize the expenditure out of the town vehicles reserve account, I will, I'll keep you informed of whatever I find and proceed with any of the changes, but that's kind of where we stand with this unexpected situation.
I move that we authorize the town administrator to at the reserve account up to $15,000 for the purchase of the.
Can you specify 9035 reserve account?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Second by Richard. Conversation, discussion, David?
Quick question, do you need a vehicle for tomorrow? That happens tomorrow.
I mean, I was gonna reach out to Bob.
I'll be there.
I have 3 people coming on the 8 o'clock boat. I could squeeze them in my little Subaru, but that's not exactly the most comfortable vehicle and it shakes really hard, so.
Since I'm in that meeting, I'll be happy to pick them up. Other discussion? All right, any discussion from the public? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor, it's been seconded, all in favor? Unanimous.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna send you a resource, and we'll talk about it later.
Yep. Anything that you can think of, shoot my way, please.
All right, and any other business from Vika?
No, just a couple communications, but nothing that requires a dire need of emergency vote.
Any other business from the board? All right, moving on to communications, Vika?
So the one communication that I have that, well, there's a couple, but one worth sharing is, the recreation center did send the town a drafted and an updated MOU. I did, in doing the agenda, we didn't add it to this agenda item for the sake of, we had several discussions that had been ongoing for several weeks that I thought would be helpful to just kind of finish before we move on to another big discussion, but at the next agenda item, it would be helpful to have that discussion. There are some really great suggestions in that MOU that didn't exist in previous discussions, so it would be nice to have that be finalized, seen as that is something that is expected of the board and the rec center to do relative to the funding that they receive. That's one of the communications. The other communication was received shortly after the last meeting, which I believe I forwarded to all of you, and that was just relative to Bennett's Cove, and it was just GEI letting us, CCing us on an email that they sent to the state officials, asking to set up a meeting with DOT to discuss alternative areas, more specifically Sunset. So I have not heard anything else. There were no responses on our end, but they are proceeding by the looks of it to the process of kind of looking at alternatives.
Was it DOT or DEP?
DOT.
DOT.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did reach out to DEP and try to coordinate some of those. That was a number of weeks back. This was, the communication was to Chris Mayo to talk about other transportation options.
Okay.
So.
All right, other communications?
I don't think so.
David?
I just want to mention that Richard and I are working with the broadband committee to have an open house on October the 13th, starting at 1 p.m. to celebrate the almost completion of the new broadband network here in Maryland.
Yep, cool.
Where is that?
Here at the hall.
At the hall. Just I thought it would be good to mention that.
All right. Moving on to approval of minutes from September 18.
I move that we accept the minutes. Do you want to do?
No.
Oh, you, the minutes from the September 18, 2024 meeting.
Do you have a second? Sure. Second by David. All in favor? Unanimous with Carol absent. And items to be placed on a future agenda item, in addition to the items that are in queue. Tonight, I wrote down brush dump, open dump hours only policy and fees at brush dump. as a future discussion. Fire department budget update at our 10/16 meeting. Coastal Waters recommendation regarding the quotes. Hopefully they will have back to us at some point soon. And then a range of items to discuss relative to the parking ordinance, including some possible short-term changes. A possibility of the town chartering in effect and perhaps providing insurance infrastructure kind of things for a taxi service as a way to ameliorate parking issues. And lastly, the recently received updated memo of understanding from the recreation center. Anything else anybody wrote down as future agenda items? Chris, anything else? Okay, I'll get these on the spreadsheet.
I wonder if we want to report on the workshop thing.
The other
Yeah.
priority workshops? Oh, yeah, for sure. Yep. Report out on priorities workshop. All right. And probably good to incorporate the final results of the survey.
Right, that would
with
be a
the-
good.
Yep. Okay. All right, all noted. With that, I would entertain a motion that we enter executive session at this point in time.
After bio.
After about, yeah.
So,
Can you read it, David? Can you read it on the back of the page?
move that we move into executive session for certain to, I say, page 405, section 405C, C, acquisition of real property, land swap and acquisition.
Is there a second? Second by Richard, second, all in favor? Unanimous with Carol absent. Right. We're now in executive session after bio break.
And maybe be down.
I'll turn it down more, but